You're listening to Where You Live with Gene and Tony.
Welcome back to Where You Live with Gene and Tony. We're broadcasting live from the Concierge Landscape Studios. We're brought to you the second hour, also by Extreme Exteriors. If you're just joining us, we're talking to Mike Vraw, who's the managing attorney and director of Homeline Inc. We've been talking about the book, How to Be the Smartest Renter on the Block. And I mentioned right before going to break, we were going to talk about eviction. Who's responsible for the eviction of bed bugs? Is it the landlord or the tenant? What sayest you?
Well, first of all, let me just mention how much bed bugs are part of my work life right now, and I'm sure yours as well. 2005, I think we took maybe 5 calls on bed bugs. Last year, we took 350 from 23 counties in this state. It's not just in the inner city. Yeah. It's everywhere, and it's going to be more everywhere.
How many times have you dealt with that issue?
I've dealt with bed bugs 3 times now.
3 times.
And we manage 110 single-family homes and then 75 units in multi-unit buildings. So I feel like we've been pretty lucky so far.
It's coming, though. I mean, New York City's been dealing with this problem for a lot longer than us. They haven't figured out a solution. And trust me, if they could have, with money, they would have solved it, and they haven't solved it.
And I've heard they're finding them in public places, like bus seats and theater seats.
They'll close down a store for a month because they find bed bugs in a clothing store.
Oh, my gosh.
Because people go in trying the clothes, they have the bed bugs going with them. Yeah.
And they bring them with them.
So landlords believe that residents bring bed bugs with them.
Of course. That's what landlords believe.
That's right.
And I'm sure that's a big part of the problem, right? But it's really hard for a landlord to show. Well, let me tell you what a landlord has to prove. This is the problem that a landlord has. And let me tell you what I heard a landlord lawyer say at a legal seminar about 6 months ago when it comes to this case, that if a landlord wanted to charge the bed bug for tenants, which is the most common call we get, by the way, landlord's fixing it, but they want to charge me for it.
Yeah, and it's really expensive.
Yes, it can be thousands of dollars depending on the solution the landlord uses. Yeah. So anyhow, the landlord lawyer said if the landlord wants a good case where they can charge the tenant for it, what they have is a videotape of the tenant walking in with a jar of bed bugs, opening the jar, and dancing around and triumphantly saying, I got the landlord. That is a good case for the landlord charging the tenant. This is a landlord lawyer saying it.
This was a landlord attorney?
Yes.
Oh, dear.
Let me tell you the legal standard that you're up against as a landlord here.
All right.
You've got to show that the tenant brought the bed bugs in with one of 3 thresholds: willful, so that's on purpose; malicious, which is even more on purpose; or, this is the easiest one, irresponsible. You've got to show that the tenant irresponsibly brought in the bed bugs. So let's say you go to the movie. I went to the movie last night.
Yeah.
And I sat in a seat that somebody sat in maybe 10 minutes before me. If I brought bed bugs home, did I do that irresponsibly? How could you say that legally?
Yeah.
No way you're going to get to that level.
Yeah.
So, all right, the bed bug jar is a crazy example, obviously, but the tenant brings in a mattress they found in the alley, right? Because their kids were sleeping on the floor, so they bring that in, or they get that from a shelter or some sort of place that gets used
I actually had
furniture.
some renters that worked in a hotel,
Sure.
and I know that they brought mattresses home from the hotel.
They might have just brought it home from working there. They're around people that are coming in and out.
That's
right?
true, too.
But so they went to work. Was that irresponsible? That's what a landlord has. That's the standard the landlord has to get to. It's really difficult if a landlord argues that the tenant brought them in to the legal level that they need to say that they have to pay for.
And I can understand that that's difficult. The other part, though, that I think is sometimes even though something may not be malicious, that was one word, or
malicious, willful, or irresponsible.
Yeah. There are times that things are still your responsibility. An example would be, I do not willfully have my dog attack anybody. My dog is a kind dog, but if it ends up getting off tether and someone tried to get to the dog and the dog bit him, I still have responsibility, even though there was nothing willful on my part
or irresponsible,
or nothing irresponsible. But I still have responsibility.
Well, again, this is a specific statute in landlord-tenant law.
Specific issue.
It actually wasn't written with bed bugs in mind. It was written with all repair issues in mind, and bed bugs just happen to be one of those issues that falls in that.
Here's the dilemma, and we mentioned this earlier. It is so expensive to treat for bed bugs. And I have gotten by with as little as $500 because we have a great exterminator who I forgot to mention in the first hour. That's Greg Keener from Pest Control Services, where he offers great service. So you pay a fee for the extermination, and then he will follow up. And in fact, gives a lot of attention to the renter, which is I love because the renter feels well taken care of. But it's so expensive.
Yes.
Everyone says the most effective treatment is the heat treatment where they bring it on, but that costs thousands often. Those costs are going to have to be borne by the renters
ultimately
at some point
yes.
because landlords can't afford to just shell that out without raising their rents.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're right. It may not be directly, but indirectly, it's the same as there is with theft in retail, right? And people end up.
Well, but I always feel like if you can lay the responsibility on one person, that's better than spreading it out among a lot of innocent people, isn't it?
I get the point, but I mean, innocent's a nice word to use there. That you're blaming the tenant for bringing the bed bugs in.
How about not guilt? Oh,
again, how do you show that they did it? How do you show that that's the standard that a landlord has to get to? And this has been a very congenial conversation, but we're actually, and I'm sure that Legal Aid, a similar organization to ours, we're looking for cases where we can set strict, firm precedents where landlords can't just say, well, I don't, basically what you just said, I don't like it because it costs too much. That's basic argument that landlords have. I know the law says what it says, but it costs so much, I don't want to follow the law this time.
No, I didn't say I didn't want to follow the law. What I'm saying is I disagree with it.
Okay.
And because it is a huge cost that's now going to be shared by everyone when the problem was probably caused by one. And I agree there would have to be a way to show this. But you're making everyone pay for one person's carelessness, or
well, again, go into the movie. Is that careless?
Yeah, I don't know. What about if there's a clause in the lease that says you will pay for extermination of bed bugs?
Doesn't really matter. As you guys know, most of landlord-tenant law is state law governed, and there's this presumption in landlord-tenant law that the landlords always write the lease, which is pretty correct. I mean, you guys don't say, hey, you want to rent from me? Where's your lease? Let's look it over. So you write all the rules you want.
Okay, yep.
And the law many times simply trumps the contract.
Yeah.
And that's what happens on a repair issue.
Well, and I think pretty much we cannot write a clause in a lease that makes someone give up a right.
Oh, you can put it in the lease. It's not going to be enforceable
but it can't
by
be
a court.
Enforceable.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, and there is a greater standard in law, always has been, for those who write up the contract, because they're the ones that are defining the terms.
Where it comes up in landlord-tenant law is if a landlord has terms that are ambiguous. If it's two sort of competing terms that aren't really consistent, then the tenant would get to pick whichever one they like the best. That's for all contracts, not just landlord-tenant.
Sure.
Well, I've really enjoyed our conversation here today. Mike, thanks so much for being on the show with us. And before we take another break here, and before we let you go here, let our listeners know one more time where they could get this book if they'd like to get
and
this
how to
copy
reach
for themselves.
Homeline as well.
Again, the book is available at www.homelinemn.org. They can also call our tenant hotline, which is free during regular business hours, 612-728-5767.
Okay. Thanks so much for being part of the show today.
Nice to see you again.
Folks, we're going to take a quick break. In the remaining couple segments, we're going to be dealing with Senate File 926. It's back, better than before, but there's still some issues and concerns if you're living in a homeowners association. You want to hear about this, so don't go away.